the Ontario budget coming up, we're going to probably end up with an interesting mix of fiscal policy. So, like on a budget policy over the next little while, because at the federal level, now we had the federal budget back in March. That's essentially the federal government is still in spend mode. They want to spend, and in fact, they're having the federal government is having a hard time hitting their deficit level. There's more money coming into the federal coffers than they expected, and they committed to a deficit path, for example, around $18 billion in fiscal year that just ended, that it looked like the federal deficit would be a lot lower, but they decided to spend more to hit that. It's kind of weird, a weird logic. They promise a certain level of deficit, whereas what we're probably about to hear from the Ontario provincial government on Thursday, and that actually we hope to hear from them, is that the Ontario's deficit is going to get cut, and over the next 4 years, or at least several years for the fiscal plan, that the Ontario government is going to address its own deficit challenges. And so you might end up with a federal government that's looking for excuses to spend money, and at the provincial level looking for excuses to cut spending, which the net effect at the end of the day, we're not quite sure. And if anything, probably the provincial level, it might have a bigger impact. So you might end up having, in terms of contribution to the economy, having the public sector side of the economy being a little bit, if not in a restraint mode, maybe in a contractionary mode to a certain extent. We've heard a number of announcements made recently, for example, in education, that ultimately lead us to believe that they will restrain spending going forward. But it'll be interesting to see what they will announce on Thursday. Now, the reason why we are hoping to see some significant reduction in the deficit is that it is a very unusual, from a macroeconomic policy, it's a very unusual time, and we can make the same criticism of the U.S., and the federal government as well, to run huge deficit when you are at the top of the economic cycle. Usually, the rationale for running deficits, if you go back to the old textbooks and everything, the idea was when you're in a period of recession, you need the public side to borrow to get the economy going. And once the economy is going, then you run a little bit of surpluses so that you can you're ready for the next downturn after that. That's the rationale. Now, what we're end up at this stage is that you're at the top of the economic cycle. The economy does not really need either any kind of stimulus or not that much at this stage. You need, at a minimum, to have a balanced budget. If not, starting to run a little bit of surpluses to get your debt, the weight of your debt down relative to the size of your economy, to prepare for the next downturn. Because as I've pointed out, we're probably closer to the next recession than the last one. So it would be sound from a responsible government to say, let's shape things up, let's get ready for when things are not going to get as good from an economic point of view, so that we are able to keep the economic cycle going. And so, in that way, our advice to Ontario's finance minister, Mr. Fedeli, was make some progress. I mean, it's going to be tough decisions. Okay, we've seen on Saturday with all the demonstration in Queen's Park from teachers, and I've got some sympathy for teachers. But at the end of the day, you need tough decisions made from elected officials to ensure the stability and the long-term viability of your fiscal position over time. So, which means to do a lot of progress early on their mandate. The tough decisions from a political point of view normally should be done in year 1, year 2 of your mandate, and then start to ease off once you start to make some progress. So we'll see. We'll see what the budget will bring. Hopefully, I don't know, I'm crossing my fingers. Right now, the current estimate for the deficit in Ontario is $13.5 billion, which still ranks as the 3rd highest ever in nominal terms. Keep in mind that the top 2 were during deep recessions. So it is very unusual situation now to have that huge a deficit at such, let's call it, good economic times. So I'm still crossing my, because there's probably going to be revised down, because there's part of that deficit number, there's $1 billion of contingency reserve, which if not used, then you take it off the deficit. So it's probably they're probably going to show a lower deficits for the fiscal year that just ended last month. And we're still kind of crossing our finger, we might see a single-digit deficit in the new fiscal year that just started, and then some significant decrease. But we'll see, and I'm kind of curious to see what your opinion is on this one. I mean, these are, I've followed the Quebec situation, where I think provides a very good template for the Ontario government. Unfortunately, the story in Quebec didn't end well for the government that made those tough decisions. The previous Liberal government were defeated in the last elections, which I find that future generations will probably have a different opinion than the current generation of voters. I think what the previous Quebec government has done will have tremendous benefits for future generations, but that's my own personal opinion. But that's the kind of dynamics or the kind of decision making that will be required here in Ontario to turn that ship around. It's going to be a tough one, and with very tough decisions. So.